can help increase hair growth in androgenetic alopecia, and it has nothing to do with scalp tension per se. Nothing to do with that at all, rather. It has to do with the decrease of TGF-beta 1, right? So I'm using Botox as a proxy, a mechanistic proxy of what happens when you reduce TGF-beta 1, and in this case, that would be the Pirfenidone gel. Hey everyone, this is going to be the first episode of a new series that I'm going to make where I look at products and the way they're formulated, because now I'm kind of in that space and I'm trying to increase my sensibilities. And really the best way of doing that is to look at the products that I use myself on a day-to-day basis and see what I like about them. Now, this first episode is going to be about a particular topical gel that I use called Pirfenidone. Now, the molecule is called Pirfenidone, but the brands themselves, there's two particular brands here. The first brand being Kitoscell, and the second being Perfisca. I think that's how you pronounce it, Perfisca. So you're probably naturally asking, what is Pirfenidone? Well, Pirfenidone is a small molecule anti-fibrotic and anti-inflammatory drug best known for its systemic use in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And when it comes to the dermatological space, there is some chatter about its use for dampening pro-fibrotic signaling, especially TGF-beta 1, along with reducing inflammatory mediators in different models. So I went down this route because while I've been treating my androgenetic alopecia for the past 4 or 5 years, I've also had to deal with inflammation along the way, being chronic seborrheic dermatitis, eczema, and also I had a somewhat serious bout of folliculitis. And especially after getting the folliculitis under control and moving into a maintenance routine with clobetasol solution and calcipotriol to keep that inflammation down while being mindful of long-term steroid atrophy, I still had a few weak areas in my midsection that I wanted to improve. So years ago, I got a biopsy back, and in my biopsy report, it actually stated that there was fibrosis in the area. Not too much, but there was some signs of minor fibrosis. And although I've made a great improvement in terms of my hair loss protocol and just growing hair in general, it's that mid-area, that midsection area of the scalp that was affected by the folliculitis, eczema, and seborrheic dermatitis, these sort of chronic inflammatory conditions that kind of made the follicles there a bit weak. And if you're dealing with that over time, it just gets weaker and weaker. And, again, if you're solving your DHT issues, that treats androgenetic alopecia. But once you have issues outside of that, it's still going to potentially damage your hair follicles or reduce your hair follicles' capacity to produce more hair. So after, 2 years worth of research, I figured that it was worth trying to see if I can recover some ground in the area by targeting the sort of fibrosis layer that might be restricting follicular growth. And really, when you look at histology reports, the biopsy reports rather, when it comes to androgenetic alopecia, there's always some sort of weird collagen deposition. And in extreme cases, just straight up fibrosis produced by androgenetic alopecia. In fact, we can get an idea about what TGF-beta 1 is doing when it comes to the androgenetic alopecia model, when we're looking at a paper titled, quote, Androgen Modulation of Wnt Beta-Catenin Signaling in Androgenetic Alopecia by Premanand Adalakazmi and Reena Rajkumari, unquote. And here you can see some pretty cool things. So first, you have the free testosterone, right, which is circulating outside of the cell. Then it comes inside the cell's cytoplasm, and then it interacts with 5-alpha reductase. By interacting with 5-alpha reductase, that free testosterone converts into DHT, and thus the DHT presence increases. And after that, the DHT finds the androgen receptor, and it connects to each other, and it forms a complex. And from there, that goes into the nucleus of the cell. And the nucleus of the cell is where the DNA is, right? So if you have genes that encode for, let's just say androgenetic alopecia genes, hair loss genes that are essentially telling your cell to increase certain proteins that suppress the follicle's growth and decrease certain proteins that would signal for the follicle to grow hair, we're going to have these particular outcomes. And over here, it actually talks about androgen response elements, and those androgen response elements will encode for certain genes, and the target genes will upregulate, down here if you look again, TGF-beta 1, interleukin 6, and DKK1. So TGF-beta 1 is what we're interested in, right? Pirfenidone itself can suppress TGF-beta 1, interferon alpha or gamma, interleukin 6, and other sort of interleukins. It's a very, I don't want to say super potent, but it's a decently potent anti-fibrotic, anti-inflammatory sort of compound. And over here, from this model, we can see that TGF-beta 1 suppresses keratinocyte growth, and interleukin 6 suppresses the keratinocyte's proliferation. So if you're suppressing cell growth, that is the size of the cell itself, the mass and the volume, while proliferation itself is about the number of cells you're actually going to get. So if both of those factors are reduced, then you're not going to have as much hair, and the hair that you do produce is going to be thin, wispy, over time. But really, this video isn't for that. I'm just trying to explain why I used pirfenidone. So again, I use pirfenidone just to address that fibrotic nature of AGA, but also just to address the fibrosis that I had in the area anyway, right? If I could somehow reduce the fibrotic layer, it could possibly help the follicles grow that aren't too damaged by the folliculitis, seborrheic dermatitis, and eczema bout that I dealt with for about a year. With that being said, I originally started with Kitoscell Pirfenidone gel from Amazon. I'll put the link for all these in the description. And it does feel like a legit product in terms of texture and use. Now, for me, before I apply anything consistently on my scalp, I always put a little bit on my arm, because if there's any sort of inflammatory or allergic reactions I could possibly get, I would like to monitor that over the next couple of days. So I'll apply it on my arm, do a skin test for about a week, just to see how my body reacts. So that's what I did with this particular gel. And it dried pretty easily. Right? Now, it's one thing if you're putting it on your arm. It's another thing when you're putting it on your scalp, because if you already have the hair over there and your hair is maybe curly or coarse, it's going to be kind of difficult to get it onto the scalp itself. So you really have to massage it in there. But that's inherent to any sort of gel product you might be using, especially if it's like a gel like minoxidil or, in this case, a pirfenidone gel, right? It just becomes physically harder for you to not waste a portion of that gel on the hair itself and try to get it on the scalp. So that's why you really have to make sure you're massaging it and getting it onto your scalp. But it's not heavy. It doesn't leave any sort of residue. And what I like about the Kitoscell is that it had this like long nozzle. So when you're trying to apply it in the area, it's kind of direct, right? So I kind of use the tip of it to, move it or the gel around on the scalp and to really target the, problem areas. Now, the Perfisca from dailyotc.com, it also has the same gel-like consistency as the Kitoscell, and it's, again, very easy to spread. It's pretty much the same formulation, if I'm going to be honest with you, if not a bit more watery, so to speak, and there's no overly greasy feeling. But the price difference is honestly the whole story. So Perfisca from DailyOTC is I paid $30 for it for a 30-gram tube, and I bought 2 tubes, so I got 60 grams in total. And for the shipping itself, because it's coming from, I think, India, it's around $35. So roughly $90 to $95 to my door. And it arrived in about a week from Daily OTC. With Amazon Kitoscell, I paid around $79 for a smaller option, right? And I was kind of pissed off because I was using that for a couple months. But yeah, it's $79 for the 10 grams that I got, but I had to pay $40 when it comes to shipping on Amazon just to get it to my house. And again, I live in the United States of America. Now, they do have some deals on Amazon for Kitoscell, and that is the 13.5 gram bundle. So you have 2 boxes, one 10 gram and one 3.5 gram. But once you add shipping, you're basically at $120 for a total of 13.5 gram. And the 30 gram Kitoscell option, they do have a 30 gram Kitoscell option, but again, it's a bit more expensive as well. By the time you include shipping and handling from Amazon, it's around $200, again, to the United States. So Perfisca, give or take some ingredients, because they do feel different, right? Again, the Perfisca is a bit more watery than it is like the Kitoscell gel, but it's pretty much the same thing. And, $30 for 30 grams, getting two, so $60 for 60 grams. And then after that, paying the $30 shipping fee, it was pretty fair. So that's why I went with daily OTC over Amazon. But, pick whatever is practical for you. And of course, go talk to a doctor to see if this is something you could possibly use. Now, I do want to give some important insights, warnings on both of these boxes from Amazon and Daily OTC. It's that do not wear the Pirfenidone gel, in direct sunlight because it can cause some UV sensitivity. So don't wear it in the morning. Don't wear it when you're about to go outside. It's best to wear it under low UV index, preferably at night before you go to bed. And then in the morning, just proceed with caution, right? If you can wear a hat, that would be cool too. Maybe over time you can grow your hair and cover any sort of, more exposed areas. But yeah, don't just wear it and then go outside in the blazing sunlight. It is preferable to just wear it at night. I transitioned from using the clobetasol propionate and calcipotriol to using Pirfenidone, and I've been doing this for around 4 to 5 months now, and I only do this around 3 times a week at most. I don't want to do it too much, but 3 times a week at night is the sweet spot for me. And I'll try to put up some pictures over here. But yeah, these pictures look actually worse than it actually is, the August 2025 picture. But I'm standing under, direct light, and I'm also using the flash from my camera. And I'm also in the second picture, so the pictures on the right for both January 2026 and August 2025. I'm also turning off the bathroom light and using flash so you can see a more, direct view of my scalp. Because in such a condition, you're able to see the density, the distribution of the hair, and, any sort of coverage tricks can be exposed. And to be honest, I think I've been getting some good recovery by using this. So I'm very happy with my implementation of Pirfenidone gel. And now just the final bit I want to mention, I want to circle back on the TGF-beta 1 point and just emphasize this. The reason why Pirfenidone is interesting for hair and scalp conditions, at least in a conceptual sense, because we don't have any direct studies that show this, is that the inflammation and fibrosis that shows up in the androgenetic alopecia mechanism of action is more than people want to admit, right? Or more than what we typically talk about in these sort of videos and in literature, right? Where everyone's so focused on, androgen activity, DHT activity, but let's try to look at the things downstream of DHT and the androgen receptor signaling. And once again, when we go back to that model that I showed you earlier, TGF-beta 1 can be elevated and typically is, and that helps to create this pro-fibrotic environment that can be unfriendly to normal hair cycling. So if you look at Botox, right, we have some studies on the use of Botox and how it has helped increase hair counts in hair loss studies, specifically to androgenetic alopecia, and even in other conditions too, right? Like folliculitis decalvans. But let's focus on androgenetic alopecia for a moment. So there was a study, I'm just going to do it off the top of my head in this review. Again, I don't want to make it literature heavy, but they compared the use of Botox and finasteride versus Botox. In particularly, if we look at the Zhao et al. Study, it showed that the Botox group did not differ statistically from the Botox plus finasteride group. But in both groups, they had a significant increase in hair density. So that's pretty cool. It was a small study involving 63 men, but it was randomized. So that kind of lends credence to potentially TGF inhibition being maybe a short-term sort of benefit. We don't have any long-term studies, but maybe it can be a short-term benefit when it comes to slowing down androgenetic alopecia. And the interesting aspect about this study is that they only did injections, about 4 courses of 100 units of Botox every 3 months for 12 months, right? And using Pirfenidone gel, you could in theory do it daily. I don't do it daily, but you could do it a bit more frequently than you would do an injection into your scalp. So maybe, for me, 3 times a week is more than enough. We also have another study from Tien et al. That involved 37 male patients aged 20 to 51 that were treated with 5% minoxidil topically and 1 milligram finasteride orally. within the same patients, they essentially split the scalp and they applied Botox to one side and they didn't apply Botox to the other side. And the side that received the Botox had a greater increase of hair density. This is pretty good as a design because you're comparing the subject with itself, essentially. You're comparing one side of the scalp that received what is pretty much the TGF-beta inhibition treatment to another side that didn't get it, and the subject is still using the finasteride and the minoxidil. So any sort of increase in hair count may be attributed to the intervention of the Botox, especially when that improvement is not uniformed and specifically localized to the area of injection. And there are so many studies that seem to show that Botox can help increase hair growth in androgenetic alopecia, and it has nothing to do with scalp tension per se. Nothing to do with that at all, rather. It has to do with the decrease of TGF-beta 1, right? So I'm using Botox as a proxy, a mechanistic proxy of what happens when you reduce TGF-beta 1, and in this case, that would be the Pirfenidone gel. So yeah, let's not nerd out too much. I have other things to do and other longer videos to make, but hopefully this video was coherent enough. And yeah, that's why I'm using Perfisca Pirfenidone, and the formulation for me, again, that gel-like, nearly watery kind of solution is preferable, and I have to give it an A+. So you can see a link to the Kitoscell and Pirfenidone. I'll try to put that in the description. And once again, talk to your doctor. Always talk to your doctor before you implement anything new over the counter or otherwise anything new into your hair loss stack. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. See you guys. Peace.